I was joking around last night at the dinner. There was a bunch of people having beers at the restaurant that we were having in the square. And whoa, my peoples, what? And I was joking around saying that by this point in time, because everybody I was talking to was like, yeah, I'm leaving Wednesday morning. Yeah, I'm leaving Wednesday. Oh, I got to fly out Tuesday night. And I was like, there's not going to be anybody left for my talk on Wednesday afternoon. But so I'm really happy. Thank you for staying the course and staying the whole conference and all this time to get to the very end to come to this talk. Now, a couple of things I want to tell you about my talk. The first one is that there are no slides of code, for which I'm hoping that you'll be grateful. There's just nice pictures. So this is like your time to kind of sink down and, start processing all of the stuff that you've learned over the last 3 days and give your brain a little bit of a chance to relax from coding and think about something else. The second one is that we were talking about Daniel's talk yesterday morning, and I do want to give you guys forewarning that there is something quasi-emotional in it, but there's a happy ending. So just so you're prepared ahead of time. So with that, I'll get started. If you're tweeting by any chance, I always like to put this up for people. My Twitter handle is Denise Jacobs, and you know where we're at. And if you want to hashtag it, it's Get Unblocked. Now, a lot of times I start off my talks talking about what I do, but what I do is kind of interwoven in the talk, so I'm not going to start off. I'm just going to get right started. And so a lot of times, I listen to the keynotes on Monday morning. I listened to some of the keynotes yesterday morning. I saw a little bit of Venkat's talk, and I saw a little bit of the talk of the eclipse, and I saw a few other talks. And one of the things that I thought was kind of this interesting thread was this kind of idea of flow and getting into the zone and really being able to do like amazing work. Mary was talking about on Monday morning, she was talking about sharpening your saw, right? And, doing stuff that's really valuable for your end users, and then also doing something that makes kind of a positive change that contributes to the world in a positive way. But the thing is that when we're blocked, and when I say when we're blocked creatively, and I'll get into that a little bit more, when we're blocked, we can't do anything. Yesterday, Ted said that the entire industry is broken, right? He was talking about how, management and the principles of management were based on the spurious claims of this guy who created this whole system, made his, equivalent of $2.5 million and then exited the scene, but somehow or another in the process started the Harvard Business School, which I just think is like disturbing at best. So the thing is the industry's broken. We end up having situations where we have managers. If you're a manager, I'm sorry, you know how it is. You probably had this before you were a manager. But how many of you guys are managers here? Yeah, not that many. Okay, so it's not personal. I'm not talking to you personally. But a lot of times, because you have a manager too, and you know what it's like, you have these managers that come up and make unreasonable demands, just kind of like Ted was talking about yesterday. We're office bound. A lot of times we're in these like cubicles, we're in these dingy, gray, kind of unimaginative environments that don't spur us to be able to do stuff. A lot of times we have time pressures, right? You start getting into the flow of something, and then somebody comes and truncates it, interrupts your flow, or you have the deadlines. The project's going great, and then all of a sudden what we want to do is we want to shorten the timeline, because obviously if it's going great we have to change it by making more pressure. And if you're independent, how many of you guys are independent freelancers types? Okay, so that counts for me. So if that's the case, then you have to go and you have to find clients, and then your clients are asking for things that you probably can't deliver, and you have to educate them and everything. If you're working in a company, a lot of times you want to get things done, you want to initiate change, but you have all this red tape and this bureaucracy around your ideas. And what this ends up doing is blocking us. Our brains feel oppressed, and we feel kind of like puppets on the string, like Mary was talking about. We're not thinking for ourselves. We're just doing what we're told because we don't have the reserves and we don't have the mental wherewithal to do anything different. We're just completely shut down. So instead of having your ideas be able to kind of come out of your head, all of these wonderful, fanciful, amazing ideas, being able to make amazing tools for really smart people like Daniel was talking about yesterday. Instead of that, we run into roadblocks, right? We run into thinking blocks, we run into creativity blocks, and we run out of inspiration, creative inspiration. And a lot of times that also kind of translates into running out of energy and being able to think through things well. Now, you guys have all experienced this. When you're in the creative flow, you know what it feels like. Everybody's talked about that so far. The way I like to think about it is that we're alchemists, that we are able to take these ideas that are kind of floating around in the ether, and we're able to capture these ideas and take them and pull them through ourselves and push them out into the world, thereby transforming them from the ethereal into the tangible. And if that doesn't feel like magic, I don't know what does, right? Somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want you to build me an application that does X. And you sit there and you think about it a little bit and you think, okay, yeah, I can do that. That's not magic. That's not magical. That's amazing. There's a great TED Talk, which I highly recommend that you watch, which is by Charles Lim. And it's called Your Brain on Improvisation. And what he does is he takes people who can play improvisational jazz, and he puts them in an EEG machine, and he monitors their brains while he's playing back and forth jazz with them. They have a little keyboard. They're like laying there with a keyboard kind of upright, and they're playing back and forth. They're riffing back and forth and playing jazz. And one of the things that he says in this is that creativity is magical, but it's not magic. It's something that we have the capacity and the capability to get in touch with and to channel every single day, but only if we practice it. Ted yesterday said that we developers, and I would say other creative people, are very much like the Jedi, that we're these powerful creators and that we're like the Jedi. We're all tapped into the Force. And the Force, like as I like to think of, is kind of the creative energy, the creative force that runs through us. But the problem is, because of all the things I was talking about earlier, managers, cubicles, time constraints, clients, etc., instead of actually being able to use it fully, a lot of the times I feel like that force, that power that we all hold, that we all have, and we all have channeled easily, effortlessly at one point in time in our lives, if not many, we often give this power away, right? Partially, it's not our fault. Partially, it's the way that, because the industry is broken, because work is broken, partially it's because of how we're trained. This is how you work. You sit there, you sit at your thing, people come and interrupt you all the time, you get email notifications all the time, you get text messages and other kinds of notifications all the time, and you're supposed to somehow, magically, produce well all the time in that kind of environment. So instead of experiencing this force, this power that we were talking about, we have a lot of times instead like anxiety and stress and sometimes depression, and sometimes even that can translate into physical pain. So I gave you kind of a little kind of background on how the state of affairs as it is, but where does it come from? How does it get started? A lot of times what happens is it starts when we're young. It starts from other people and kind of how we're taught. And so, by the way, just as a little aside, how many of you here actually feel like you are creative? Give me a show of hands. Okay, that's a pretty small percentage. I want to suggest to you that as developers, as people who create as I like to call them, digital entities in whatever way, shape, and form they come out, that you're some of the most creative people on the planet. Take that and chew on that for a while. So, 3 stories I'm going to share with you from my own childhood and from my own life to show you the ways that I feel like my blocks to creativity showed up and how I started working through them. So, most stories start once upon a time, but I'm going to skip once upon a time and just say, at the age of 6, very interestingly, I had a kind of a major realization. I grew up in a family of kind of eclectic, creative people, but people who were also kind of scientists and inventor types. My father was trained as an aeronautical engineer. In his free time, he built experimental aircraft. That is an aircraft, that's actually the second airplane. He built 3 airplanes in his life. And when I was growing up, in my garage, instead of a car, we had an airplane. And so, and I didn't know any better. I thought everybody had an airplane in their garage. Why not? We would go over to other people's houses and they would give us the tour of their house and we'd get to the garage and then afterwards I would turn to my mom and I would say, Mommy, where's their airplane? And she looked down at me, she goes, not everybody has an airplane. I'm like, why? We have one. So my father used to build experimental aircraft. He was an aeronautical engineer until he decided he didn't want to work for anybody, and he went back to school, he became an optometrist, and then he became independent. So I grew up with my father coming home from work every single day that he went to work and going straight to the garage, changing his clothes and then going straight to the garage and working on his airplane until like midnight. So that was my father. My mother, now this is the 70s. Please excuse my mother for being a product of the time. So my mother used to make fur hangings. That's her fur hanging in the back with a buffalo, and she used to design them and make them with fake fur. I don't know why she made them with fake fur. It was just one of those things you did in the 70s. She also did macrame. She also sewed clothes. And so my sister and I would have cute little matching outfits that my mother sewed. And my mother would, be on the sewing machine or be at the macrame thing for hours. And I watched my mother doing that. And then my sister was a fine artist. And so she was very good at colored pencil. She was very good at watercolor. And my sister actually ended up studying architecture for a little bit, but decided that she wanted to do something totally different because she loved to cook. And she ended up starting a business where she made cakes for the stars. And so when you see fancy cakes with people's pictures on them and sculptures of buildings and stuff like that made out of cake, my sister used to make those. She made a cake that was like a wine basket with cheese and a wine bottle and a loaf of bread that looked so real that people would look at it and say, "Where's the cake?" And she'd say, "That is the cake." And they were like, "No, it's not." Yes. So, my father, airplanes. My mother, sewing, making all kinds of wonderful things. My sister, fine artist. And that left me. Now, I'm the baby of the family. I'm seeing all these people do all this stuff, and I start thinking, how am I creative? It turned out that what ended up happening was that I was more of a graphic artist and kind of did more, graphic arts. This is a mural of the world that I did in high school, right after high school when I was about 18. And it's really big. It's about 20 feet by 10 feet, which I don't really know what that translates into meters. You guys are, I'm sure, so much better at that than I am. I apologize. So I was more of a graphic artist. But what ended up happening, the block came because I was comparing myself. I was thinking, this thing that I do couldn't possibly be as wonderful and creative as other things that my family did. So the first block that started was this thought that I have to be like them to be creative. What I do isn't good enough. I have to be like somebody else. Age 10, a little older, out into the world more, I discovered, kind of not by accident, I just did it all the time. I thought everybody could do this as well, like everybody had an airplane in their garage. I thought everybody could sing on key. Mary's laughing. Apparently that's not true, but so then when I discovered that this was like this kind of cool thing that I could do that not everybody could do, I sat in music class next to my friend who is my oldest friend in the world, and we're still friends to this day. Have been friends since we were babies. And I sat next to Elizabeth. Elizabeth came from a very musical family, and she played cello, and she sang, and she did all this stuff. I very highly respected her opinion. So I was sitting next to her music class, and I busted out a little, like, vibrato, and she turned and she looked at me. Now, she didn't say anything, but this is what my brain said that interpreted her look. And her look, my brain said to me was, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to be able to sing? Who do you think you are to be able to be good or to be special? Just tone it down. Just be quiet and keep it under wraps and tone it down. Don't intimidate anybody. And then at the age of 24, a little bit older, and as you can see, every time I believed some these misbeliefs, these mistaken beliefs. Every time I took one of them in, I gave a piece of myself away. I gave a chunk of myself away, and I think that's what we do. And then we take in this horrible feeling, and that's what starts to create the blocks. So 24 years old, I graduate from college. Woo! Should be exciting and wonderful. Of course, nobody tells you that when you graduate from college, that means that you have to figure out what the heck you're going to do with the rest of your life, right? So I graduate from college. There I am with my family. They came to Seattle for my graduation from the University of Washington. And I remember not too long afterwards having a conversation with my dad. And Dad said, well, so what do you think you want to do? And I had taken plenty of classes where I had to write papers and stuff. And a lot of my professors were like, you're really good at writing. And I was like, oh, do you think so? I mean, I don't know. I write poetry. I would write short stories. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll be a writer. I don't know, like Maya Angelou, who I really admire. Maybe I could be a writer. And my father turned to me, and this is not a thought. This is what he said verbatim. Do you know how hard it is to get published? Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but that's not what you want to hear when you're just out of college. You want to hear, you can do whatever you want. I know culturally that's an expectation that Americans have, and a lot of other countries are just like, your dad totally was straight up. Like, he totally like put you on track, girl. Like, what are you supposed to do? Yeah, but you know what? You don't want to hear that. You want to hear somebody give you some encouragement, right? Hearing that was not the right thing for him to say. Just want to give you guys an insight. Now, here's the interesting thing. My father, as I told you, was not a slouch. My father was a badass, okay? My father did not take to, trying to do things inside of a little place. He did not take to barriers. In 1957, my father was about 20. My father got his pilot's license in 1957. Now, if you're familiar with racial history in the United States, you may be aware that in the 50s, for Black people, there weren't a lot of opportunities. My father grew up in Detroit, Michigan, which was more progressive because it was in the north. But for a young Black man at the age of 20 or 21 to get a pilot's license in Detroit in 1957 is kind of a big freaking deal, right? Mary says it's right, so it's got to be right. So my father was not like at all about, just staying put and doing what you think people are what you're supposed to do. My father broke barriers. So to hear him say, have you ever thought, it's hard to get published? And also, my father's never tried to publish a book, as far as I know. So that information was kind of interesting. So I took what he said and I translated that into, I have to be superlative. I have to be like Superwoman. In order to succeed, I have to be like the best of the best. I have to push myself. I have to drive myself. I have to go all the time, or I'm not going to be able to succeed. All of these blocks kind of added up, and what it did for my creativity, it made it me binge create. I would create something, I would get really into it, and then I wouldn't do it for a couple of years. And then I would get really into something, and I would do it, and then I wouldn't do it for a couple of years. And then I would do the next thing, and I never hit upon anything. However, or actually I won't say however just yet, I never felt quite deserving of being able to be creative. And I was always kind of in the creativity closet. Here comes the however. However, after I wrote, incidentally, my book, The CSS Detective Guide, which, by the way, like as a tangential story, that book contract fell into my lap. Literally went to a party, talked to a woman, got an email from her, submitted a proposal, got the contract. Boom. Is it hard to publish a book? No, it's not. Incidentally, after writing this book, I had this major epiphany. Through the process of writing the book, I was able to start grappling with and start kind of dismantling a lot of those blocks that had built up in me over time. And I had this major epiphany. I had this major rush of energy. And I felt like if I can help other people feel like this, because it felt like so empowering. And I realized that everybody has this power. Everybody's got the capacity to do something and to feel that power flow through them. And that empower creativity, like Tom Gibb was talking about yesterday, empower creativity is something that we all have within reach. But we can't actually get to them if we've got these internalized critical voices that paralyze and imprison us. So the problem is, like I said, we give so much of it away, and they turn into blocks, and they also turn into these lies that we tell ourselves that basically just shut us down, right? And all of those lies add up. So instead of creativity, we practice what I've heard be called destructivity, which is like creativity's evil twin. So the question is, you're here today for me to talk about how to get unblocked. So how do we get unblocked and allow that creativity to flow through us? Now, interestingly, another thing that Ted said yesterday, I was actually taking notes, by the way, on all the keynotes, because I'm a geek like that. But Ted said that you can't force yourself to get in. He said you can't force yourself to sleep or to get into flow, right? So you can't force yourself to get into creative flow, but what you can do is you can set the conditions for it. So I'm going to give you guys a bunch of information, some tips and some pointers and stuff on how to set the conditions so that you can get into more of a creative flow state. So the process is kind of a 3-part process. The first part is to recognize and to banish. So I was talking about how these blocks came and kind of started building up and kind of keep you stuck in a lot of ways. And a lot of times it kind of translates because you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling fear, you're feeling nervous about stuff. Now, a lot of times when you're feeling anxious about something, you have physical manifestations of fear, right? Your hands will start sweating, your heart will start pounding. Some people get really sweaty, all over. That can be one manifestation of anxiety and fear. But I'm kind of talking about, like I said, more internalized fears. And what they kind of translate into are evil voices in your head. Now, I did a talk last week at the Norwegian Developers Conference, and some people afterwards were like, oh my God, you were totally talking to me. And then I talked to one guy who was like, I don't really ever feel that way. I never get that. And I was like, okay, he was like, it was good information, but I never feel like that. So you may not feel like this, but if you do, I'm going to kind of give you some ideas on how to work with these evil voices in your head. The problem is that if you've got these voices, if you've got these things going on, then it's going to make it the place where you do your creating, the place where you go and you get into flow, the place where you're trying to produce the best. It's going to be so intimidating a place that you're not going to want to go to it. So you ever had those feelings of dread sometimes when you go to work and you're like, I got to work on this project, but I really don't want to. And you feel a feeling of dread and still a feeling of like anticipation and excitement. You can't outrun the voices in your head. So I'm going to give you some ways to ID them and how to identify basically what is known as your inner critic. So the first one is imposter syndrome. Have you guys heard of imposter syndrome? Yeah? Okay. So for the people who haven't heard of imposter syndrome, this happens a lot of times. This will kind of be what's happening in your head. In your head, you'll be thinking, oh my God, I don't know enough. If they found out how little I knew about this, they would totally fire me. Or I got lucky, I got this amazing job. I don't know how I got to be, technical lead, but, I knew a guy who knew another guy who knew a woman, and I just got lucky. Some way, somehow, they are going to find out. And if they find out, then I'm going to be out here on my butt. Now, the thing that's interesting about imposter syndrome is that imposter syndrome has what I call the imposter syndrome paradox. And the imposter syndrome paradox is this, that you cannot feel imposter syndrome unless you are actually uniquely qualified to do the thing that you think you're going to get found out about. I know, weird, right? You cannot feel imposter syndrome unless you're actually good at what you do. People who suck at what they do, they don't feel imposter syndrome. What they're experiencing is like the reality of the fact that they're just not good at it and they're not interested in it. Another thing, and this is what I experienced, like I said, when I was 6, is comparisons. If you find yourself comparing yourself to other people's successes, one of the things that really gets me is when I read Twitter. You ever get this when you read Twitter and Facebook, and people are like, I did so-and-so, whoa, and I got this, and I got this award, and I published this book, and you're just like, wow, and what am I doing? I am washing my dog. Like, that's it. And for me, it would be like washing my cat or trying to wash my cat, which is really more accurate. But when you're comparing yourself to other people, you are totally ruining your chances of actually moving forward. There's a great aphorism. I don't know if you've heard it, but I'm going to share it with you. And that is that you cannot compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. What you see of what other people do is such a small part of the story that you're actually making assessments about it on incomplete information. So if you find yourself going into comparison modes, I have a friend, she's worked in the web industry since the early 90s. This woman has written about 37 books on web design. It makes all of us look like we're just sitting around doing absolutely nothing with our lives, right? 37 books. If I compared myself, I'd be like, all I did is write one book, I would be missing the boat. You have to compare yourself to yourself and then use that as your markers to move forward. Another form of perfectionism, another form of the inner critic is perfectionism. So if you're always in the place where you just want it to be perfect and you just want to do this extra thing and you just want to, and I just need to do, then you are in perfectionist mode. Now, perfectionists, just in case that's not a good enough example, perfectionists tend to focus on the end product rather than focusing on the process. So you know how people always say this, and I always hate it when people say this, and I'm like smile and I nod and I say yes. People are like, well, it's all about the journey. And I'm like, really? I just want to get there. I mean, yes, it's about the journey. It's very important. So if you're very focused on getting there and not kind of relishing the part of, the process to get there, then you probably have perfectionist tendencies. There was a study done that kind of helps put perfectionism in its place and gives you kind of a good reference point. There was a study done where they took a group of people who were taking pottery classes, and they split it into 2 groups, and they said, okay, first group, I want you guys to make the best pot possible. Great. Second group, I want you to throw as many pots as you possibly can. So they got to work, and the first group has anybody thrown pottery here? Throwing pottery is awesome. You should just totally just go and do it because it's amazing. So they're there, the wheel is spinning, they got their thing of clay, they put it down, and they start throwing their pots. And it's really cool. You put your thumb in it, and then you push it out, and then it's amazing watching it. It looks like magic. So they're throwing the pots, and the group that's trying to make the best pot is getting frustrated and getting anxious, and they're, that's not right. And they're putting it aside, that one's not right. The other group that's trying to just make as many pots as possible, guess what they are? They're in the zone. At the end, guess who had the best pots? Bam. The second group, obviously, because I wouldn't be telling you the story if it wasn't that, right? The second group ended up having the best pots, and incidentally, a lot more pots, right? It was partially because they didn't care. There was no attachment. It was partially because every single time they threw a pot, they learned from it. They made mistakes, and then they learned from it, and they were able to improve. They were able to iterate. There's a quote that says that perfectionism is the highest order of self-abuse. So know that, and know that when you're in a perfectionist place, you're not really going to get as much done as if you kind of let that go, and that you realize that that also will help the flow start. Another thing, this is the problem with perfectionism, but I'm going to move on to the next thing. The last thing that you can use to identify, and this is actually just one of like several things that I could talk about, but I've got only a little bit of time. So, but procrastination. So here's the interesting thing about procrastination. I like to think of perfectionism and procrastination as twin brother and sister, right? One and feeds into the other one. So if you're a perfectionist, what ends up happening when you want it to be perfect and you want to just put that little extra time into it and all this stuff, and then what happens? Your manager comes in and says, "Hey, is that piece of code done?" And you're like, "No, I have to do like a few more things, and I just have to fix the stuff." And then what happens? It's late, right? A lot of times, it's not. When you procrastinate, people think procrastinators are lazy. Procrastinators aren't lazy. What happens is, and I'm a procrastinator, so I know about this, and I will say we instead of they. What happens is that we have a very low tolerance for frustration and a very low threshold for failure. And so what we're trying to do is push things, make it, because we don't want to see it fail, but we're also afraid that it's not going to be perfect. So this fear of failure is bad news. Fear, I don't know if you've ever seen this acronym for fear in English, but it can stand for false evidence appearing real. So basically looking at something and interpreting it incorrectly, right? Another thing that fear could stand for is, do I have to be family friendly? No, we're all friends here. It's fuck everything and run. Right? So a lot of times that's what happens when you're feeling fear. You're just like, I'm out of here. And then you just throw up your hands and you abandon everything. Now, there's a great movie, well, I haven't seen it yet, but there's a movie that had a great quote in it at the very least, After Earth, that Will Smith was in, that came out last year. He's like nodding his head, yeah, see, power to the people. So, great quote, that fear is not real, that it is a product of the thoughts that you create. Danger is real, but fear is a choice. So if you're ever having moments when you're feeling the perfectionism, when you're feeling procrastination, when your inner critic is going crazy and like telling you that you're an imposter and all this stuff, realize that it is because of these thoughts that you're generating that you're starting to feel anxious, that you're starting to feel fear, and to start making choices to think other thoughts, to start to truncate and change that process. Because what's happening is your brain is just going along certain neurological tracks that it's used to going down all the time. It's like a rut inside of your brain. If you start to change what you're thinking, then you can actually make your brain go on a different track. So one of the things that I like to call this, I like to think about changing fear and going on these different tracks is by being like a fear alchemist. And what we're trying to do is basically manage our anxiety so that we're actually creating instead of torturing ourselves. So some ways to banish the inner critic. The first one, like I said, comparisons aren't real. Great quote, Maya Angelou, I don't know if you're aware, but she passed away not last week, but the week before last. But she has a great quote, so you probably saw like a lot of Maya Angelou. If you were on like American websites, there were like a lot of Maya Angelou quotes and pretty pictures with her quotes on them. But this is a great quote, that you alone are enough and you have nothing to prove to anybody. So comparing yourself to other people, not worth it. Keep with yourself. You don't have anything to prove to anybody. Another one is to reframe failure and to also reframe mistakes, like I said. So with the throwing the pots analogy with that story, remember that the more you do stuff, the more iterations you have, the more practice, the better at it you'll get, the more you'll get to mastery, kind of like the sharpening the saw that Mary was talking about, and the better off you'll be. And remember that failure is really only the opportunity to begin again more intelligently, just like those people who were throwing a lot of pots. One of my favorite recommendations to kind of get over this kind of fear of failure and this fear of looking bad and everything is to deliberately make something ugly. To deliberately be bad at something. If you just need to kind of clear the pipes, to get the goo out of your system, just make something really bad. Make it really ugly. Write some really bad code. Write a stupid app just to get it out of your system so that after you've gotten that out of your system, then the brilliance can come through. Great quote here that if you want to live a creative life, you do what you can to experience the beauty of the mistakes that you make. But even take it a step further, I think, and realize that there actually is no such thing as a mistake. I love this. I found this at the Stanford D School that talks about design thinking and iterations and things. That there's no mistake, there's no win, and there's no fail, there's just make. Making should be the most important thing to you, kind of like Daniel was talking about yesterday. When you focus on making something wonderful, then kind of in a way, you kind of your ego steps out of the way, and then you're able to kind of channel this wonderful creative energy into the thing that you're working on. Now, one last suggestions for this, and then I'm going to talk about some neuroscience of creativity. The last thing that you can do is you can actually use your body to make your brain behave and do it what it wants to. Now, I noticed there are some people who are like, it's the end of the day, it's like dark and warm in here, her voice is very relaxing and it's putting you to sleep, but I'm going to actually have you guys stand up and do something. Are you guys ready for it? Yes! I love him. Yeah, one guy said yes, he's already there. So I'm going to have you stand up, start waking yourself up so that you can be like, what? I want to take a nap through this. Sorry, yes. And get your stretching, by the way. If you need to stretch, get a good stretch in. Ooh, that felt good. Okay, now I'm going to have you stand while I talk about this, and then we're going to do the little exercise. Yeah, you guys are, what? Now I actually have to pay attention. So, changing your body can actually change your mind. So Amy Cuddy did a TED Talk. I'm big on watching TED Talks, obviously, but she talks about the connection of your body and your mind. And she says that our bodies change our minds change our behavior, and our behavior changes our outcomes. So if you're feeling like you're really blocked, you're feeling like kind of like put upon, anxious, ideas aren't coming to you, whatever, and you're feeling like, I need to get out of this. You may be actually sitting like this dude who is actually, that has been shown to be kind of a one down, kind of disempowered body position. And it's interesting, if you see people in meetings and you see them sitting like that, you'll be like, oh, he's that, I see where he's at, like mentally. So, in order to change that, you can do what she calls a power pose. She likes to call it the Wonder Woman pose. I say any superhero will do. Superman, whoever you resonate with. It could be Wolverine. I just like Wolverine because I think Hugh Jackman is incredibly good looking, but that's just my personal opinion. Anything that you want for our power pose. So this is what I want you guys to do. in order for you not to feel like you're going to be embarrassed and a lot of people are going to be looking at you, I want you all to close your eyes. And by the way, I can see you, so I will know if your eyes are closed or not. So close your eyes. People are like, she's not going to, I got really good vision, by the way. Optometrist, I know. Okay, so close your eyes. Now I want you, with your eyes closed, get yourself into like really embody the most, like put down, I can't do it, the ideas aren't coming, I'm in a rut, somebody just interrupted me, I'm so grouchy, all of that stuff. Just really embody it. My eyes are actually closed, so I can't even see you. Really embody it with your body and really feel all of that stuff, because if you're thinking it, your body's going to start doing it anyway. So really get into it. Okay, now I want you to shake it off. Stand up, shake it off. If you want to, you can open your eyes. Now I want you to adopt a power pose. Nice. So, woo! You can fly through the air if you want to. My personal favorite is looking off into the distance. All right, one more time. Shake it off. Okay, close your eyes again. Get into the, oh, it's not gonna, oh, and you can even sigh heavily. God, just. You can even say it in Polish, whatever you want to complain about. Wish you would stop talking. What's it talking? Oh, la, la. Okay. Now, shake it off. Whew. Ready? Power pose. Ba-ba-bum, da-da-dum. Now, interestingly, I see a few people doing this. Amy Cuddy says in her presentation, which is really interesting, you should watch it. You can keep posing, by the way, if you want to, while I'm talking. So you'll be like, I am triumphant while she's talking. I don't need to listen to her. But Amy Cuddy says that this position is the universal position for triumph, and that blind people who have never seen anybody do this in their lives will do this when they feel triumphant. What? That's crazy. Okay, thank you very much. You guys can sit down now. Yay. Oh, wait, I'm not done yet. Oh, my, 40 minutes? What? Okay, so next part, adjust and release, or replace. So that part was kind of that, recognizing your inner critic and then doing things that you can to get rid of it and to get rid of those mental blocks. Now, let's talk about what we need to do to kind of get rid of some of the blocks that are more neurological in form. Now, Daniel was talking about yesterday that it's all about preparation. Actually, I'm going to go to this one first, and then I'm going to go back to the other one. Oops. That it's all preparation, that the magic happens when you go to the stove. So this part is about the preparation. Wait. It's crazy. Dogs and cats are living together on my computer here. So it's all about getting stuff ready so that you can start, getting to the place where you get to flow. You all know that when you cook, the hardest part is doing the prep, right? But once you do the prep, everything can put together. So this is the prep part. And this is about training your brain. So a lot of times when people talk about creativity, they talk about left brain versus right brain, right? And then here you can see all the things that is associated with left brain: linear processing, logical, sequential, verbal, symbolic, reality-based. And then the right brain is more kind of ephemeral and holistic and intuitive and fantasy-driven and things like that. But the fact of the matter is that really creativity and being creative and being in the creative zone is about having your left brain and your right brain work together. Now, your left side of your brain, from the research that I've done, they suggest that information is actually stored in the left side of your brain in stacks, a lot like pancakes. Right, and there's like a lot of potato pancakes here, so you guys can relate to it. I had delicious potato pancakes last night, actually. But so, like pancakes, stacked like pancakes, and the information is very well kind of regimented and compartmentalized. Whereas the right hemisphere of your brain is more this kind of like nebulous, right? And the way I think about it is when you're being creative, whatever inhibitions you have between your right brain and your left brain communicating with each other, those inhibitions go away, and then your right brain can go and grab all kinds of things from the left side of your brain, take it, and start putting it together in new ways. And that's kind of how creativity ends up working. So a creative brain is a balanced brain. Now that we know that, let's focus on this. What is something that our brains produce all the time? Somebody shout it out. Thoughts, what else? Waves, boom, and ideas. Waves is what I'm getting at. You can you can't see from this picture. But so, little Brainwave 101 for you guys. How many of you guys are familiar with the different brainwaves? Yeah, not that many. Okay, good. So I'm not going to be telling you something you already know. So I'm going to start with beta. Can I even get a little thing? Yeah, it's a little tiny red light. So beta brainwaves is normal concentration when you're focused on the outer world, you're analyzing, you're processing, you're thinking, you're developing thoughts, whatnot. Alpha brainwaves, and you guys can see that the wave itself, it's faster, right? Then as your waves start to slow, you go into alpha brainwave mode. And alpha brainwave mode is that wonderful place when you're about to go to sleep and your body feels heavy and warm and delicious, and then all of these random thoughts start coming through your head, right? That's a lot of times that's alpha brainwave mode. Known for alert but lucid and relaxed thought, daydreaming, light meditation. It's where creativity is. It incidentally is as well. How many of you are parents here? Parents? Okay. Children, it's been shown, studies have shown that children spend almost all of their time in alpha brainwave mode until they get to about the age of 5 or 6. And so this is one of the reasons why children learn languages so fast, because alpha brainwave mode is associated with super learning. When you're in alpha brainwave mode and your brain's very relaxed, you can actually take in more information. Lower than alpha, so slower, more relaxed. Theta waves. Most of the time, theta you go into when you're sleeping, when you're dreaming, when you're in REM sleep. It's known for intuition, long-term memory, really, really intense creativity. And usually people can't go into theta wave on purpose unless they're practice meditators. And then the lowest is delta. Delta, usually you're unconscious, right? But that's when you get intuition and insight, physical rejuvenation and healing, deep dreamless sleep and unconscious states. And then finally, the highest one is gamma brainwave mode. And that is usually associated with but also hyper brain activity, sometimes anxiety, sometimes euphoria, but also processing a major amount of sensory information. So if you ever are in a crisis situation and things slow down for you, you're probably in gamma wave mode. Now, our buddy for this creativity stuff is alpha, not only because it is the lowest next one down from beta, so it's the easiest one for us to get into at will, but also because it is what I like to think of as the gateway to creativity. So, another exercise. This time you don't have to stand up. This time you can sit there, and I'm actually going to even let you close your eyes. You guys ready? Don't fall asleep on me, though. Okay, so close your eyes. Get yourself nice and relaxed, and just breathe evenly through your nose. So just keep breathing. If your shoulders are somewhere around your ears because you've been holding tension all day, you can just let your shoulders just drop. If you like, you can let your tongue rest at the roof of your mouth. You don't have to press it. You just let it rest there. Very easy, and just keep breathing. And just keep breathing. And notice how your thoughts are probably settling a little bit. Just keep breathing. Don't fall asleep. Keep breathing. Okay, now wake up if you can. Come on back to me. what you were probably experiencing is the beginning, maybe not fully into it, depends on how tired you are, but the beginning of your brain moving from beta brainwave state into alpha state. And if you have had moments where you sit down and you settle down and stuff like that, like I said, before you go to sleep or something like that, you'll notice that that's when all these thoughts will start coming to you. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, that's all great, but how can I use that in my everyday life? Well, there are 5 easy ways. Actually, there's more than 5, but I'm going to tell you about 5 easy ways to get into access alpha. We just did the first one. Sit there and breathe to refocus. As soon as you close your eyes and you start to focus inwardly instead of focusing outwardly, you go into alpha brainwave mode. Second one, another super easy. Lay down. Just laying down on the ground or on a bed or whatever will start automatically putting your brain into alpha brainwave mode. Another one is to daydream. So you've had those moments where you're sitting there and you're at your desk, and maybe if you have a window, you look out the window, and then the next thing you know, you're like, wow, where was I? Your brain just went and took a little vacation and went into alpha brainwave mode. You can actually use that deliberately to try to help your brain go into a place where you can start thinking of things and solve problems and ideate better. Fourth, take a shower. How many of you had great ideas in the shower? A nice warm shower? Yeah, like almost everybody, like so many people. Taking a shower will also automatically help you get into alpha brainwave mode. I actually know, I talked to a guy and I was telling about this, and he was like, I take sometimes 5 or 6 showers a day. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but it really helps me think through problems. And I was like, great, whatever works. And then the last one is to be physical. And it doesn't necessarily mean going to the gym and working out and doing something strenuous. Sometimes just walking will help. As a matter of fact, there's something called cross-channel communication in your body. And when your body does movement where it's moving the different parts of itself on different sides, and it's kind of doing it in a regular motion, that will actually help your brain hemispheres sync with each other and communicate better with each other and help you come up with ideas, which is why a lot of people say, I get some of my best ideas when I take a walk. So the upshot of this, and I like to think of this stuff, I call it white space creativity. It's the creativity that you get when you're actually supposedly not doing a lot. But when you're not doing a lot, that's actually when your brain starts to get itself into gear and has the opportunity to do something. One of the last things with this is I want to talk about managing time. So you guys know that part of the problem is this distraction thing, right? Interruptions and whatnot. One of the first things that I think is really important is to start determining what you're not going to do. Instead of writing to-do lists, write a to-don't list. Write a list of the things that you are going to commit to stop doing so that you can free your time up to do the things that you want to do and to do the things that you really need to do, right? It's prioritizing, but it's sometimes you have to do stuff and you're like, you know what? Maybe I can outsource that. Maybe I can have my kids do that. Maybe I can just, go and hire somebody to do that, right? So consider a to-don't list because that might really help. Another way is to say no to distractions. Now, Ted was talking about the headphone rules. So if you don't have headphones, but I'm telling you, a lot of times, not only does it help other people, but it actually helps you. A lot of times I will put headphones on without listening to anything. And just doing that, just not kind of blocking that extra layer of noise out will help me focus a lot better. You can also have digital aids. So there's a program called Rescue Time. Have you guys heard of Rescue Time? Anybody heard of Rescue Time? So there's Rescue Time. There's a couple of other ones. There's one called Concentrate. Another one I'm going to show you called Hey Focus, which works on the Mac. But Rescue Time actually, once you install it, it tracks everything that you do on every application on your computer. And then at the end of the week, it will give you a productivity score. So it'll say you spent this much time in email, this much time in Visual Basic, this much time in whatever the heck else you're using, this much time on Twitter, this much time, all this stuff. And it will tell you give you a snapshot of how much time you're spending on what and help you make different choices. The other one that I like is this program called Focus. Rescue Time also has a feature where you can have 30 minutes of focus where you can turn it on, and what it will do is it will block you from going to distractive websites. Hey Focus does the same thing, except for it's free. You just download on your computer, it's really lightweight, and then when you do try to go to a distractive website, it'll put up a little page that has some nice little quote and try to like get you, hey, you looking at this is blocked because it's figured it's distracting, now get back to work, and it'll help you kind of guide you to another thing. Now, there are other tools that you can use. I was talking about Rescue Time, hey Concentrate, hey Focus, browser extensions, Leech Block, Iderall for Firefox, and for Google Chrome, Strict Workflow and Stay Focused. All of those work really well. I'll leave this up for a couple of extra minutes in case people are always like, oh my God, and they take pictures of the slide. So these will help you for when you want to start actually single tasking. So multitasking is like the work of the devil. Our brains are actually not set up to be able to manage a whole lot of things at once. There's something called the Zeigarnik effect, which basically explains kind of how our brains start to work on a task, and if the task is interrupted, and you guys totally understand that, the process keeps running in the background. And then we start on that one task, and we go, and that process is going, and then that task gets interrupted, and that process is running in the background. And then and so on and so on and so on. And so at the end of the day, not only do you not get a lot done, but you're tired because you've got all of these kind of subconscious subroutines going on in the back of your brain of all the things that you never quite completed. So single tasking is really important. So to do that, you can use a technique called the Pomodoro technique. How many people use Pomodoro? Oh, that's a pretty good number. So for the people who don't, Pomodoro is taking your time and breaking it up into 30-minute segments. 25 minutes is focused time, non-distractive focused time. 5 minutes is a break. So what I always recommend to people is that not only do they use something like Rescue Time or Hey Focus or Leech Block or whatever you want to use as a thing to keep you from distractive sites on the web, but also in order to not get pinged through your phone is to use airplane mode and put your phone on airplane mode. And a lot of times I keep my phone on at all because my phone is what I'm using for the timer. What was I going to say? There's another one that's a little shorter that I didn't have a slide for. That's called 10 plus 2 times 5, which is 10 minutes of focus, 2-minute break, and you do that 5 times to equal an hour. So it doesn't really matter what you use, but as long as you do something that you know that you're going to have that unfocused time and that you let other people know, probably by wearing the headphones or something, that you're not to be interrupted during those periods of time. Finally, the last part of it is to connect and to play. So I can't remember who it was talking about, but they were talking about getting help when you need it and connecting with people when you need it, that you can't actually just be an island. You need to be actually working with other people. And so a lot of times creativity is not one of those things that you do best by yourself, but actually creativity is known to be superlinear, which means that the more people you have together, the more ideas you can produce and the more you can do. And have you ever met somebody that really inspired you creatively or really kind of woke up kind of a creative, fun part of you? I just was at, like I said, the NDC last week, and I met a woman who does improv, and it was like I met my new best friend. Like, she was so much fun, and she woke up all of this stuff, like all this creativity in me that I still hadn't been able to access. And so when you get around other people, it wakes you up and it helps. One of the things that you need to do, though, is that you need to avoid sameness. So it's kind of seductive when you're at a conference like this and you're with like a lot of other developers, but it might be good for you to put yourself in situations where you're with other kinds of professionals who are passionate about what they do, who are interested and interesting, and you never know that you might be talking about something that you're trying to solve, and that thing will help you. So putting yourself in a diverse environment with other people who are also intelligent and capable and interesting can produce some really amazing things creatively. You want to share your ideas and not keep them to yourself, but not just share your ideas. You also want to share your mistakes. Sometimes it's that thing, and I'm sure you've had this, even with other developers, where you're like, yeah, I was working on this thing and I couldn't get it to go, and it was like, dude, I just solved that last week. All you need to do is this. And you're like, that's amazing. I can't believe it. So when you share your mistakes with people, you share the things that you're running into blocks on, you often will find that that person has exactly the thing that you need. Finally, what you want to do is you want to amplify the ideas of others. It's really easy, I think, and I know in a lot of cultures, different cultures, that people, it's very easy to try to be smart and try to look like, especially I know this, I used to work at Microsoft and I would sit in meetings where people would sit up and the developers would be like, I am the alpha geek, and they would try to make the other people look stupid. You guys are like, I don't know anything about that. Yes. So one of the ways that you can do that that's totally different, that actually supports people instead of knocking them down, is to use some improv techniques. And the main technique is called plussing. So that when somebody suggests something, instead of you standing up and showing how smart you are by totally shooting their idea out of the sky, which their idea may have had legs, right? Their idea might have been half good. Instead of shooting their idea down, see what it's like to add to it, to support the idea and to say yes and. So the construct with plussing is yes and. If somebody says something, if you're doing an improv comedy sketch, for example, and somebody says, I was walking down the street and I saw your Aunt Ida, she had a hat on it with a bluebird. It could happen. And you're not supposed to be like, I don't have an Aunt Ida. And you don't have to be like, why is she wearing a bird on her hat? You say yes, and then you add something to that. And she was wearing a crazy dress with flowers all over it. Yes, and you keep adding to it. And the thing is that it may start off and be very innocuous. It may start off and not be much of anything. But the more you do that, the more it encourages other people to share their ideas. The more the person who's the quiet, smart person who always has great ideas that never shares them might actually get enough courage to say something, and that thing that you all have been waiting for finally comes out, and then you can build on that. So think about that. The other thing you want to do with this technique is you want to make sure that you make your partner look good. You want to make sure that that suggestion that you did, like I said, supports the person, makes them look good, and then adds to it. And then the next person who adds to your thing will make you look good as well. So it expands, it doesn't contract, it develops possibilities. Now you may say to yourself, that's all well and good, but how are you doing that in your own life? Last year, I actually put together a group which I called Power Push Writing Group, because we were all working on creating an e-book and getting something written and potentially published within the year. And we got together, we met for 8 weeks, and we had this great time of meeting and talking about our projects. Our individual projects were all different. I have one friend who's like a marketing strategist, me who does whatever I do with creativity, another friend of mine who she does branding and this, and then this one is, she's like a midwife and an obstetrician. Great. So we all have these different backgrounds, but we were all able to come together, share our ideas, support each other, and help each other move on to the next level, and it was really great. So at the end of all of this, by doing all these parts of the process, working with your inner critic, starting to leverage how your brain naturally goes into a creative state, working with other people and collaborating creatively, potentially putting yourself in a more diverse environment, doing plussing, etc. Hopefully, that will start the process where those blocks that you have given up, those pieces that you've given up of yourself, that you will start to actually reclaim them and not have those blocks. So before, where you had blocks, hopefully you'll start breaking them down and you'll kind of let like the light of day kind of come in and shine in. Now, the nice thing about all of this too, I started off talking about Mary and Ted and a couple other people talking about flow. The nice thing about this process is that it also basically sets you up for flow, and that's actually the objective of it. It sets you up for flow. So this is a great chart. Mary was talking about the flow channel, and that you can see that flow happens where you have this place where you have kind of the right amount of stimulus or arousal and a certain amount of control, a certain amount of skill and mastery, right? And enough challenge. And when you get into that place, when you have that magical elixir, that secret sauce, that's when you'll get into a flow state. And like I said, you all have felt it. You just may not have been aware of all of the pieces that were in place to get you there. So everything that I was talking about gets you there. Clarity about who you are, what you do, confidence in what you want to achieve, a certain level of mastery, cleared space, distractions eliminated, materials that you need on hand, time carved out, and a practice of coming to it regularly in place and giving it the proper attention that it needs. Not only will you achieve flow, but you'll regain or gain, if you don't have it, what I like to think of as creative confidence. And there's actually a book by David Kelly and his brother Tom Kelly called Creative Confidence. And David Kelly calls creative confidence the confidence that when given a difficult problem, we have the methodology that enable us to come up with a solution that nobody has before, right? That you know that if you have a problem in front of you, you have got all that you need to come up with a problem and to come up with a solution, and a pretty badass one at that. And so your ideas are going to be like probably on and popping and like really being produced at a more rapid rate, and that you'll probably start to experience a transformation of sort, where work starts to turn into play. And that you'll start to start reclaiming that power that you may have given away, and reclaim it by realizing that you're creative and that you matter. Now, this involves nudging your comfort zone, right? This kind of may involve doing things a little differently or having a level of awareness about what you do that you didn't have before, right? But as you can see here, your comfort zone is where you are, but the magic happens outside of the comfort zones. And the nice thing is that creative minds have always been able to survive any kind of bad training. So all of those horrible, evil voices that you have that you've internalized from your childhood and stuff, you can get past that. You stop moving down one neurological track and you can get on another one. And so by valuing yourself and your process, I hope that you'll be able to get to this kind of truer, wiser, more challenging and disruptive form of creativity. Now, great, I'm not even going to try to say his name. Like, we've bludgeoned it 3 times. I know he's Hungarian. Okay. I got that part right. Actually, I did a talk, and this guy, it was kind of amazing. This guy was standing in the back. Okay, so first of all, this dude was enormous, right? Like, I'm 6'1". If you've passed me in the halls, you know that I am not a petite little wallflower. This guy made me look like Tinkerbell, okay? He was like 6'5", really stocky and everything. Turns out that he was Hungarian, and he said to me afterwards, "Oh, you pronounce his name," and I was like, "That's great, say it again." And he said it again. I was like, "Mihaly," and he was like, "Right." But the interesting thing was that he said, "You know what? When you were talking about your stories, I could really relate. And I remember something that a teacher said to me and all this stuff." So it doesn't matter how big and strong and, impervious you look. Everybody has some kind of story that they can relate to that does this. But creativity, one of the reasons I do this is because of this quote, that creativity makes experiences more vivid. It helps every day hold the promise of new discovery, and that's really important. And so getting unblocked is how I do what I do, and it's why I do what I do. Now, Mary said this amazing thing the other day, and I was like, woo, like mind blown, that the new scarcity is the time, the energy, and brain power of bright, creative people. And that means that you, all of you in here, are a precious resource. And in order for you to create what Daniel showed us in the Apple commercial, in order to create delight, surprise, love, connection, we really need to get unblocked. It's not like a nice idea, it's a necessity. I do what I do because I'm trying to make a change in the world. And all of you, I didn't realize I was going to do this. All of you are my starfish, and all of you are the blades of grass. And I'm hoping that one of you will change what you do and really start to channel your creativity more so that you can go out into the world and make better things, and that you can make things better, and that you can also live what you love. Thank you. So, two things. I wrote several articles on creativity. One was Banishing Your Inner Critic on a list apart. Another one's Reigniting Your Creative Spark, Enhancing Creativity, and then Breaking the Perfectionism Procrastination Loop, which just came out a couple of weeks ago on Web Standard Sherpa. So, thank you very much. Yeah.